Good morning, everybody. I'm keeping this talk in English. I hope you don't mind. So I actually started my career, you can say, by smuggling a computer into India. Almost nobody here is old enough to remember a time when India was very restrictive in imports and computers. It was like a sin to bring in a computer. Customs would simply not allow it in any way. So I went with my grandmother on a trip to Singapore and bought a computer, disassembled it into little pieces, and sent some pieces with her, some pieces with my mother, and some pieces I brought back. And this is, of course, it's nobody can prosecute me for this, and it's all the more amazing because my grandmother was Mrs. A.V. Mayappan, wife of Thiru ABM. Because I got started so early, well before computers were understood to be so important and before the liberalization that happened in 1992 in India, it was a huge help for me. It helped me get into the first batch of computer science that was in India, which was in REC Trichy. I had done well in school and I managed to get enough marks to get into a couple of good colleges, but REC was the option I chose because it was the first batch. In 1981 it started for computer science. But the syllabus for that computer science was not quite okay. It was a very poor syllabus actually. And so a few of us went to our principal and asked him saying, can we get a better syllabus? He said, you make a proposal and come to me. So we made a proposal based on all sorts of top colleges in the US. Where we got the syllabus by post from various colleges. There was no internet at that time, in case you guys are wondering. And we made the syllabus out of the best of all of these colleges. Colleges like Yale and MIT and Cornell and Berkeley, really top colleges in the world. We took that syllabus and made it into one. Of course, we didn't think about who was going to teach us this. We were young students and we were somewhat stupid. But the syllabus that we proposed got passed almost completely, and Madras University introduced that as the syllabus. So it really helped us, but it also taught me the value of learning some things from first principles. Our teachers were well-meaning and tried their best, but this was a new subject for everybody in India at that time. And so many of us students read the textbooks little by little, understood, explained to each other, and it was all self-learning, but it taught us that if you start from scratch, you can learn anything and become good at it. Most of us passed with very good marks, but most of the time during the college, we also learned to do a lot more than study. Next slide, please. So I wrote a program that would allow desktop publishing on the Atari 800 computer. And we designed some fonts and printed the first 2 issues of our college magazine on this. So I believe this will be the first time that desktop publishing was used in India, or almost anywhere in the world for that matter. We also did computer graphics, and it actually made it into the cover of the college magazine. And again, it'll be one of the early uses of computer graphics for print. So while I was in the last couple of semesters of college, my father was making a feature film. He was directing a film, and because I had a lot of interest in sound, he said, why don't you come and help me with the soundtrack? And I worked with him on the soundtrack, and I realized that so many things could be improved in that process with the equipment that we were using in India in those days. Again, remember, it was a very restrictive time and it was difficult to import many things. So most studios were stuck with whatever they had managed to import, and the economics of importing something, paying 110% duty and still managing with the low rates that we were able to charge in India was quite an achievement. So I decided that I had a clever way out of this to combine systems and combine much lower cost equipment which was used for music recording set up a audio post-production studio. But this experience of working in a movie soundtrack really taught me all about how film sound is done, and that is what set the base for what I was going to do next. At the same time, there was a agency called SIPCOT, which was set up to help encourage industries in Tamil Nadu. And SIPCOT had a loan for engineering graduates without any collateral at all. So I had applied for a loan, and I used, at that time there was the first spreadsheet program in the world. It was called VisiCalc. I used that VisiCalc to calculate the loan parameters and the business plan. And that was amazing because SIPCOT normally had a huge set of forms that had to be filled in by hand, and all the calculations were to be done by hand. It was basically a spreadsheet fully on paper. And when I put it into the computer, it taught me business in a way that would have been impossible if it had been some years later. So I managed to go back each morning to SIPCOT with recalculations if they wanted any changes, and they were amazed because they thought it will take a week for each of those stages. But finally, I got a very big loan in those days from SIPCOT with no collateral at all, and that enabled me to set up a studio called Media Artists. As I was mentioning, I used very low-cost equipment, multi-track, 8-track recorders that were designed for music recording for independent musicians. Those were still very high quality because music was still the most demanding medium for quality. And I used that equipment locked to film projectors. Now, this was where it was something that had not been tried in India before, which is locking film projectors to these low-cost systems. And that kept us at a very low cost in terms of the equipment that we had to buy, but it made our quality very, very high. And because, again, I was used to working from first principles, I didn't see any problem with locking this film equipment to the music equipment. It was something that was being done in the rest of the world, so I assumed that it should be perfectly possible to do it. And step by step, I understood how the process was, got all the equipment necessary. In those days, again, like I mentioned, it was 110% duty, so every dollar you spent meant a hell of a lot here. Of course, the dollar rate was far lower. I think it was 8 rupees to a dollar then. And today it's 85 rupees, of course. I also got in some computer graphics equipment. Again, this was not quite legally done, but I managed to get in some equipment and programmed computer graphics for ad commercials for video output, because computer graphics in those days was certainly not good enough to go on film. But the amazing thing is that at that time there was no library. Even to draw a line on a computer, you had to understand the basics of the algorithm to draw a line and code that algorithm. So even every fundamental aspect of graphics had to be programmed from scratch. There was just no libraries. It's a very different world that we live in today, but it's also good to make a start when there's nothing and you can learn the rules from books and code those algorithms, which is what I did. After having set up Media Artists as a recording studio, I kept finding that there was a need for doing sound effects in a better way. And it was being done, of course, with a lot of artists who would make the sound. If you wanted footsteps, they would actually move shoes on top of sand or on top of some tiles to make the right noises, etc. And all of that worked well, except that it was a very laborious thing. And when you came to sounds like bullets or a car engine starting, it would always be a pre-recorded version of the car starting and running. It would not exactly fit the visual. It would just be a bit fake. And movies are always about realism. The more real you can make the soundtrack, the more people will believe what's on the screen and emotionally connect with that. So one idea that we had, and by then H. Sridhar, who's one of India and one of the world's best recording engineers, had joined. He still had a part-time job as a marketing person in Hasbro, but he was spending about half his time in Media Artists in the studio. So we came across this need for doing sound effects in a better way. And it was also the time in which the first samplers which could sample sounds and play them out on a keyboard. Those samplers were really meant for sampling musical instruments and playing a realistic version of those instruments. So we used samplers to sample the sounds of various, like a car engine starting, first gear sound, second gear sound, the sound of the gear change, all of those kinds of sounds, the sounds of a brake, squeal, those kinds of individual sounds we would sample, put them all into the sampler and play them out on an on-screen keyboard or a real keyboard to match the action on the screen. But of course, again, it's not exactly accurate. You can't make the exact same sound to match what's on the screen because it's not repeatable. And this was days before what we have today as digital audio workstations existed. So I wrote a program called SFX, which would send out MIDI signals to the sampler to trigger and lock to the time code of the film to trigger the sound effects exactly where we wanted it. And this made possible like a very, very creative sound effects. So for punches, we would have 20 different types of sounds, and different effects supervisors will choose which combination of those punches for each thing. But the punches would land exactly right every time because they were locked to the time code. This made the work very easy, and it made the quality of the soundtracks that came out of media artists very high, which is why we actually won several state and national awards for soundtracks. Among the things that we also did was sample like 30 or 40 different Indian instruments for the first time ever, and publish this as a library for musicians around the world to use. Even today, we hear some of these sounds in albums across the world. Now the studio was doing great, and we were recording. We worked a lot with some of the greatest artists. We had worked with Ilayaraja sir, we had worked with Rahman, we had worked with George Harrison of the Beatles, with Pandit Ravi Shankar. Everything was going great. Kamal Hassan, who had started to work with us, was working on the dubbing of Guna at that time. When suddenly one morning there was a smoke coming out of one of the rooms in the studio building, and that was at 6 a.m. or so, and we called some fire engines. In those days, again, our fire services were not as organized as they are today, and it was tough to find water. It took a while, but they finally put out the fire by about 9 o'clock or so. But then one of the firemen made a mistake of opening the room to the studio. Actually, at that moment in the studio, there was a huge music recording session going on, and which had been going on in the previous night, and it was locked and kept. But when you open the door of a room that is on, which has some slight burning parts inside, what happens is the oxygen rushes in and everything catches fire. So it's one of the most important lessons for firemen, that they should not let oxygen into a room where there's some fire going on. And this, so when the fireman opened the door, it basically blew up the whole studio. And then the fire was uncontrollable, lasted until about 6 p.m. in the evening. There were 11 fire engines that fought it all day. But essentially what happened was that the building was left as completely empty, burnt shell. One good thing I learned about myself is that I was not at all fazed by this. Insurance was there, and we were working on getting the insurance done. But during this time, a friend who had been recording in the studio often, Jijo, came with a proposal saying that he was doing this series for Doordarshan, and Doordarshan was the only channel in India at that time. He wanted me to help him with doing the post-production of this program, Bible Ki Kahaniyan, which was various stories from the Bible, which was going to be shot on Super 16mm. The first time Super 16 was being used in India, he had imported a camera just for this purpose. And it was also going to be made in film style, but it was still 50 minutes of material per week. That's like every 2 weeks making a feature film. That's the size of what he was making. So looking around how to improve that post-production process, came across Avid nonlinear editing and other nonlinear editing systems. But that was the year that nonlinear editing as a concept had emerged, 1992. It was very primitive at that time still, and we did a lot of research together on what was the ideal system to bring to India, and decided that Avid was the most promising of all. So then Jijo bought an Avid, brought it to India, we set it up and started working. And some months later, somebody from Avid came to India to help us set up the system. But when they came, they found that we were already working full scale on it and producing episode after episode. So they asked if we could help them promote Avid in India and sell the product. And that's when I asked someone I had been working with in the ad field, Jayendra, and another friend, Modi, who had also set up a video studio, if we could set up a new company to do this Avid work. So while I continue to do Media Artists, the audio post-production facility. And we set up Real Image to do this at that time. So Avid worked out very well. We met all the top directors and editors around India. First time I went to Bombay to try to meet various people. But because I was pretty young and this was a whole new technology, it was very easy to meet people and show them how this all worked, and people took to it very easily. And little by little, we got the industry completely convinced about working on Avid and nonlinear editing. One of the problems, though, was Avid editing changes how things are done before and after. If you're working on film, it makes it much harder because you have to go back and cut the film negative afterwards. So we had to change those processes, teach all the facilities that had telecines, which was the way of converting film to digital, film to video, because there was no digital at that time yet. So we helped make all of those changes also happen. And the Avid revolution really took off over maybe the course of 3 or 4 years. While Avid was doing quite well, next slide please. Sorry, I have to also mention the first film. We went to Kamal Hassan and showed him a demo, and he said, I will edit my next film. Straight away he jumped in it and said, I'll edit my next film on it. And I worked with his editor Satish, I was like an assistant to Satish for that film, working with him on every aspect of the film, and it also helped me learn editing in a much better way. Mahanadi went on to win a couple of national awards. It was of course an amazing film, but I'm still not able to find it on OTT. So one day we had been working for many years with Dolby to try to bring Dolby to India. We worked on the first Dolby stereo production in India, which is a short film, a 50-minute film for director Mani Kaul from Bombay. This was called Cloud Door, and it was the first Dolby stereo mix in India. It was all done at Media Artists in a kind of temporary setup. And at that time, I had asked the people at Dolby, why don't you bring Dolby Digital to India instead of bringing Dolby Stereo? Because the rest of the world was just moving to digital. And India had already shown that it was worth moving directly from older analog to digital, rather than go through a transition phase of many years. For example, India moved very quickly from old analog crossbar exchanges to digital exchanges without going through a long phase of electronic exchanges, which were just better versions of the analog. But Dolby came back and said, no, India is not ready for digital. You need to go through the same 10 years of change that the rest of the world did. We definitely didn't agree with that. So we looked around for options and found this small startup in the US called DTS. DTS had just been set up by Steven Spielberg and Universal Pictures. So it was backed by very big people, but it was a startup and they were trying to do digital sound for Jurassic Park and get some mileage out of that, move to Europe. So when we met DTS and we explained to them how we had an audio studio, we knew all about audio post-production, we had done Avid and we knew about how to promote technology in the cinema industry. They said that you seem like the perfect company to take DTS to India, but we have a problem. We have no time or money to devote to this market because our next market is Europe. So if you want, we'll license it to you. You do what you want in India, but we will not be able to help you much. We'll send one person to set up the initial movie. After that, you can't count on us for anything. So on those terms, we started to do DTS in India, and it worked out very well. So, one problem with any new technology like DTS or even digital cinema is when you go to a producer and say, do your film in DTS, they'll say, how do you, what's the point of me spending money on all this when I don't have theaters to release in? And if you go to theaters and say, buy equipment, they'll say, what will I buy it for? Just 1 or 2 Hollywood films is not enough. We need Indian films. So to break this chicken and egg, what we did is we took all the money that we had earned that till then from Avid, and put it into buying DTS equipment. And we put it out in theaters with a deal saying, after you play 3 movies, you can either buy it or you can return it to us if you don't like. And this convinced enough producers to do DTS. Next slide, please. So we actually had Abba Vanan come forward very quickly to say that he'll do his film. He spent so much time and energy on it. And it was also the learning phase for Sridhar, me and the rest of our team on how DTS or surround sound mixes are made, how 5.1 mixes are made. Because until then, Indian movies had only been mono. Most important of all, we learned how to mix music in surround sound. That had never been done in the world before. Because there's no music as a great thing for cinema, and outside of cinema there was no surround sound at that time. We learnt this, and we also helped all other studios across India start to use these techniques, and we got 2 other movies on board pretty close to the first one. So while Karuppu Roja remains the first DTS movie in India, there were 2 quick back-to-back movies. One was Indian, again with Kamal Hassan, and other was Sirai Chalai, which was the Tamil version of Kala Pani. Now, unfortunately, Karuppu Roja didn't work out in the box office. It was the sound was appreciated. It won an award for sound, but it didn't succeed as a movie. But Indian worked very well. Sirai Chalai worked very well, and Indian helped us take DTS to Bombay also, because the Bombay distributor loved the sound and thought that it was a great thing. So again, he spent the money to equip a lot of theaters across Maharashtra and Gujarat, and that's how DTS spread across the country. After that, we thought that the next big change that was going to come in the cinema industry was the move to digital cinema itself. DTS started to do well and everything was going great, so we thought we had to look at what's next. And we did a demo in Bombay in 1999 along with Barco to show during the Mami festival in Bombay, to show the industry the comparison between digital and film. So we took the song Chaya Chaya and converted that to digital. And we also took a scene from the same movie. And both those we showed in both the film print and digital. And the entire industry was there. All of the top directors and cinematographers and producers. And everybody agreed that the quality was good enough for digital to become mainstream. Except that the economics was not right, of course, at that time in 1999. But seeing this, we decided that we really should develop a solution for India, rather than buy a solution from abroad like we had done with Avid and DTS. And by a great coincidence, someone from the US had mailed through the link on our website to say that he was very interested in what we were doing, and did we have plans to do development. And he came over, we met, and we really got along well. And Rajesh is now the CTO of Qube, and he's been with the company ever since the early 2000s, and went back. He spent a couple of years in India and then went back to the US to set up our US office in LA. Also at that time, decided that having an audio studio, having my colleague Jayendra's JS Films for ad production, and all of these separate companies was not healthy, because each of us might spend different times in this. We needed to align all of our motivations and purposes. So we combined it into one company, and we also got a round of venture funding for the first time. So we started product development in 2000, and in 2004 it was ready to be tested at least. And my cousin AVM Shanmugam agreed to provide the theatre for his theatre for testing, and it was the 100th day of Peralagan. And from there to the 200th day, it played on digital for the first time in India. It's amazing how movies are have had such a life in those days. But of course, the cost of film prints made it impossible to do a wide release like how digital allows today. After that, we had the system ready enough for rollout, and we set it up. Again, we knew from the DTS days how to promote a technology now. And we set up the Qube system in 35 theatres across Tamil Nadu. And we decided that after a lot of discussions with the theatres and producers and distributors, that the best model was to do the advertising for the theaters using this digital medium. So we started with just one state, and it was our home state, so it was better for us to do it in Tamil Nadu. And we put it out in 35 theaters, got these two amazing films to come on April 14th on digital. And that was the commercial launch. And our deal to the theaters and the distributors was, whenever there is no film print accompanying it, because for all these initial releases, a film print came as a safety backup. So we said, whenever you feel safe enough about digital cinema that you don't want a film print as a backup, that time we'll go with charging every time you use the equipment 1/4 of the cost of the film print. And that's how this concept of a VPF, or virtual print fee, started off in India. It is a different model from the rest of the world. Rest of the world, they were looking at it as the cost of a film print itself, but for a fixed period of 10 to 12 years. Here we thought of it as much lower than a film print, more like a rental of using the equipment in return for us spending the money on the equipment. And this model kind of continues to this day, though it's a bit controversial once in a while. Also in 2005, we got the first Hollywood film. There were formal standards being set by Hollywood for digital cinema, and we made our equipment conform to those standards, got it tested by Disney, and they released their film in Satyam Cinema. It was in the main Satyam screen, where Chicken Little started to play. It was the first Hollywood film played on the Qube system, and from then on it's been continuous that we've had support from all the Hollywood studios. We also had been working on this model of advertising in the theater as a way to make digital cinema profitable for the theater and to fund the cost of the equipment. So initially we thought if we had about 100 screens in Tamil Nadu, it would work. But that wasn't the case. It really looked like, unless you got about 30 to 40% of a market in terms of the number of screens, advertisers were not really interested. But slowly it started to work out, the advertising started to work in the Tamil Nadu market, and then we went to different states and it started to roll out across India. We also had international sales finally. We got into a chain in the US called Landmark Cinemas. They do offbeat movies, festival films, that kind of films, and occasionally release mainstream. And it was a small chain across the US, maybe about 200 screens, which is quite small for the US because they have about 38,000 screens. And we also got one of the most important chains in Korea, which is CGV, which was about half the Korean market. Both these were quite toughly fought deals, not very profitable, but very important in terms of getting our equipment out there and learning more about what improvements we needed to make. We also got cinema advertising onto a satellite network in India, built systems to schedule the advertising in theaters from a central place. And because internet was not very available or reliable, we used a satellite network in those days. And that got rolling. Things were really working out well. And finally, the transition almost completely to film happened by about 2011. So we were kind of generally expanding across India and selling to different parts of the world. We have sold several thousand systems all over the world, including in China, Australia, New Zealand, Italy, Spain, UK, etc. Then we saw a problem with how Indian movies are being distributed worldwide. Usually things are done quite last minute in India, and one of the problems with that is that when you want to release internationally, you end up missing out on many countries because you don't reach the movies there on time. Even after digital, the way that movies were being released in many countries was that people would fly with a hard drive or many hard drives and deliver it to theaters in different countries, and that was the extent of the reach. Hindi was a little more organized than Tamil or Telugu, but it was still pretty bad. So we built a product that used the web as a way to deliver, and still kept it very simple for the cinema by building a device that will download it automatically from the cloud in a very efficient manner and ingest it into the theater systems. This is called CubeWire, and it had many different things like how the keys for the cinema are handled and the entire workflow for approvals from one distributor to another distributor, from the producer to a master distributor. All of those processes were not only made digital and available on the web, it was also made secure, and we got an award for the best security design from RSA, the association that is actually the most active worldwide in security. And Qube has grown over the years, and in fact, it was one of the important things that kept us alive during COVID. And today, Indian movies have expanded the distribution internationally to 2 times or more in size than in 2018 when Qube launched. And we handle about 97 to 98% of Indian movies going global. We also handle all the Hollywood studios releasing in India, in the Middle East, many different countries like Malaysia or Australia, New Zealand, Hungary, the Philippines. A lot of growth across. So currently Qube delivers to 135 countries and is still growing quite well everywhere. Trying to also help other industries go to different parts of the world, like how Indian industry has become global. Of course, one thing about cinema is that there is competition from streaming, and the cinema experience is what has to be that much better to bring audiences back to the theatre. So we launched a premium large format called Epic, which would promise the best cinema experience you could have with any movie. And we launched the first theatre in Sulurpet just before COVID. But after a long gap, now we have 5 or 6 Epic screens in operation, and hopefully it will be around 20 by end of 2025. Back in during the COVID time, I was hugely surprised suddenly to see an email in my inbox that I got up early one morning to see an email that said you are invited, and it was actually an invitation to join the academy. It's a rare thing for somebody who's not in the creative spaces. So I actually thought it was some spam till I clicked on the link and saw that it actually went to the academy website. That was of course a great honor, and now I get to watch a lot of movies every year. Post-COVID, one of the things that we wanted to try was this whole concept of virtual production, which uses an LED wall to as a backdrop, and for a 3D generated image to be shown in that backdrop. Now, as some of you who are in gaming might know, that gaming has made the quality of 3D generation faster, better, and more photorealistic. So now it's at a point where with enough computing power, you can make a background in 3D that looks indistinguishable from reality. And because it's being generated in real time, it can also track the camera and always show the right perspective from the camera's point of view. So for the actors, acting in front of a LED means that they feel like they are in the set. And for cinematographers, this means that they don't have to worry about green spill and green screen. Whatever light that comes from the LED falls on the actors and makes them look utterly real. And for the director, it means that immediately he gets a shot that is perfect in every way, and it can go on to the final film. There's no long process of VFX and the expensive process of VFX. We set up in partnership with Annapurna Studios in Hyderabad because we don't know the studio business, but it's a co-investment by both parties, and it's doing quite well, but it's still early days. There's a lot of pre-production, a lot of changes in the processes that have to be made by the creative team in the movie, but some of the larger movies are starting to use it, and I think in the next few years it'll be the norm that people shoot with the virtual production stage rather than go to or build difficult sets or go to exotic places. I want to just conclude by saying the only thing that is constant is change. And there are many more ideas and innovations that we are working on. Some will succeed, some won't. And obviously next time we'll be talking only about the ones that succeeded. But there are always things that we tried to do and which didn't work out. So failure as much as change is also a part of life. Thank you.